All right, today's standard is solving multi-step equations. The objective is I can solve equations. Key steps. So we're still going to follow the order of operations, but first we're going to simplify. And so that means we're going to distribute or combine like terms or both. And then we're going to do our normal backwards order of operations. Example 1, negative 4x minus 6x equals negative 20. So I'm going to first simplify. I don't see distributing possible because there's no parentheses. So I'm going to combine like terms. So I have negative 4x and negative 6x, and together they make negative 10x equals negative 20. I'm going to bring down. And so now it's just a matter of doing our backwards order of operations like normal. All that's left is multiplication. And I know that to cancel out the negative 10 to isolate the variable, I'm going to divide. Since there's multiplication in the problem, the opposite is division. And so whatever I do to one side, my golden rule, I do to the other. And so x will now equal positive 2. Example 2, 6 equals 1 minus 2n plus 5. So first I'm going to look to C, and I have no parentheses, so I know I can't distribute. So then I'm going to go straight to combining like terms. So the 6 is over here by itself, but on the other side of the equal sign, I know that positive 1 and positive 5 are like terms because neither of them have a variable. So I'm going to go ahead and combine them together to simplify this. So I'm going to bring down my 6 and my equal sign, and I know together those make 6. And then I'm going to bring down my minus 2n. And now that I've simplified, I'm going to go ahead and start my backwards order of operations. So on the side of my variable, I have this 6 and this negative 2. And I know that I'm going to start backwards order of operations with my adding and subtracting. So this is a positive 6. So in order to move it to the other side of the equal sign, I'm going to go ahead and subtract it. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So I have 6 minus 6, which is 0. Bring down my equal sign, and on this side, I have negative 2n that I'm going to drop down. So all that's left is my negative 2 on the same side of the variable. And so since they're being multiplied in the problem, I know I'm going to cancel out using division. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. And so 0 divided by negative 2 is 0. And so that means n equals 0. Example 3, negative 4 times negative 6x minus 3 equals 12. So starting with simplifying, I see parentheses, so I know I'm going to distribute. So I'm going to multiply this negative 4 times negative 6x, which is going to give us positive 24x. And then also times negative 3, which is going to give us positive 12. I'm going to bring down my equals 12. Then I check for combining like terms. I see no like terms on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. And start my backwards order of operations. So I know that the 24 and the 12 are on the same side as the variable. So I'm going to move those over to isolate the variable. So starting with my adding and subtracting, I know I must start with the plus 12. So in order to move it, I'm going to subtract 12 because that's the opposite of addition. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So I'm going to bring down my 24x, my equal sign, and 12 minus 12 is 0. Then I have 24 times x equals 0, and so my final step is to divide both sides by 24 to cancel out that multiplication. Divide by 24, x equals 0. Example 4, negative 8 equals negative times the quantity of x plus 4 plus 1. So going back to my key steps, I need to simplify first so I can distribute. What this negative out here is the same thing as a negative 1 outside of the parentheses, so I want to distribute it to both the x and the 4. I'm going to bring down my negative 8, and so this negative times x would just become negative x, same thing as negative 1x, and then negative times 4, negative 1 times 4 is a minus 4, And then I'm going to bring down my plus 1. I'm not going to distribute to the plus 1 because that's not in parentheses. So I've distributed. And now I want to check for combining like terms on the same side as the equal sign. So over here to my right side, I know that there's no other x's but this -4 plus 1. Those are both like terms because neither of them have a variable. And so I'm going to bring down my -8, my equal sign, my -1x, and -4 plus 1 is -3. So I've combined like terms, and now I'm going to continue with my backwards order of operations. And so I know I have a -1 here in front of the x, and then a -3, and so I will need to use my -3 first, going off that backwards PEMDAS. So this is subtraction in the problem, so I know I'm going to add to cancel, add. So we got -8 plus 3, which is -5. Bring down my equal sign, and I have a -x here, or -1x. And so you never want to leave this x negative. You're not done until it's completely positive. So since that's the same thing as having a -1 in front of the x, which is multiplication in the problem, I want to cancel out by dividing by -1 on both sides. So that will give me x equal +5. In example 5, I have the square root of x plus 5 minus 2 equals 10. So thinking about backwards order of first, I want to see if I can simplify, but I don't see any distributing or combining like terms. There's nothing to combine together. So I'm going to go ahead and start with backwards PEMDAS, my adding and subtracting. I know that I need to move this -2 over first because that's what we start with. And so I am going to add 2 to cancel it out. I'm going to bring down my square root of x plus 5 and then equals 12. So now I know that I've done adding and subtracting. There's no multiplication and division in the problem. So I need my exponents. Well, I know the opposite of squaring something. The opposite of square rooting something is squaring it. So I'm going to cancel out this square root by squaring it. That cancels out. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So over here on my left side, I have x plus 5 equals, and then 12 squared is 144. And then to continue with my backwards order of operations, the p is what's left because this was part of our grouping symbol. And so we are going to subtract 5, since that's addition, we got to cancel it out, and so x equals 139. Now there's a problem for you to try.